that it was Nasir El-Rufai who wrote a book called The Accidental Public Servant. I would say that I'm an accidental development worker. When I was in secondary school, as a young chap, I think almost every year I had a different dream of what I wanted to become. So I was changing it like change your shirt. At some point I wanted to be a computer scientist because my father was a publisher, and to do his work, publishing work, he bought a computer. So I was introduced to computers at a very early age. I think that was 1996, thereabout. And my father warned that nobody should touch it. Fortunately, I was one of those kids that you should not give me a warning. If you ask me to do something, not to do something, I'll most likely do the direct opposite. So my curiosity got the better of me. I put on the computer on my own and figured out I think I navigated towards playing games initially. My father caught me a couple of times. You know what fathers do when they catch you during those days. So I wanted to be a computer engineer. At some point, I wanted to be a journalist. When growing up in the 90s, I was inspired by people like Gani Faremi, so I wanted to be a lawyer. But I was in science class. My father also wrote a government textbook. I think that also inspired me a bit. I read his government textbook while I was in science class, and we would debate. I would argue with him about politics and governance. From maybe at age 10, 11, we would debate national issues, politics, ASU strike, NUPENG strike, labor strike, fuel scarcity at such a young age. So I think that laid the foundation for what I now do today. At that time, I didn't know. I went to school to study accounting. I volunteered with a couple of organizations here and there, and that journey has led me to this moment. These days, as I ruminate over my career and over the work that I've done, and I see younger people these days, and I see some of the things they do, I chuckle, but one of my mantra, I don't give unsolicited advice except you are very close to me. One thing I feel now that I think is overrated, that I didn't know a couple of years ago, is speaking truth to power. Because at the end of the day, if you get the opportunity to speak truth to power, what next? Does it change the mind of the president? Does it move any action? Is there sustainable change? No. 90% of the time, no. I now believe that change takes time. Sometimes it's slow. A few times it can be accelerated. But sustainable change does not happen by speaking truth to power. And that within the cultural context of Africa, if you speak truth to power in a way that is arrogant, that is not respectful of elders, you've just had one moment of fame where you feel powerful and people respect you, that you've spoken a lot of grammar. But what you have done is you've lost the opportunity to build the foundation that gives you an opportunity to work on change for a longer time. And the opposite side, they're not going to listen to you. They're not going to ask you to come and let's discuss for future opportunities and collaboration. And you're going to burn bridges with that. So does that mean we should not speak our truth? I think that we should continue to speak our truth, but we should reflect on the point that speaking truth to power does not necessarily cause real change. I can approach a government official today, I can approach a state governor and say, you're a chief, you're very corrupt. Yeah. Or I can say, the young people in this state are not feeling the development efforts of government here. Young people are unemployed, water is not running, quality of education is poor. You probably have said the same thing, but with different mannerisms and approach. One of the things that make me happy the most is the young people that I have worked with over time, when I see them succeed. Some of them work with us, workers, some as volunteers, some who have engaged in different programs, been beneficiaries. When I see that some of them are potentially on a certain path before, but based on the information and the knowledge that they receive from our programming, from interacting with us, they change course and make something out of their life. These days, there are emerging opportunities. Climate change, we're just scratching the surface, it's going to be very big. So if you're a young person, you want to get into the development field, that's an area that you need to look at. I think that in Africa also, governance would continue to remain a challenge as we strengthen and deepen our democracy. to be tested here and there. So there's also some work that will need to be done around that field. I also feel that issues pertaining to women, girls, feminism is also on the rise, not just in Nigeria, but across the continent. So that's another bucket of work to do. I also believe that work around minority groups, although very controversial in a country like Nigeria, but we are not going to wish it away. It's going to continue to remain there. But irregardless of what the popular options are, I don't believe that you should select where your opportunity lies based on climate change. I think it should be driven by your own personal desires. What can keep you awake at night? So I always ask people to focus on the issues, leave the personalities outside of it. That way you would see that you have a longer staying power. You will not be accused of working for the opposition, being sponsored by the opposition or this. You remain on the issues. Second thing is about consistency. A lot of young people want to start an organization or work somewhere, and in 2 years, boom, you've made it. Slow, small. It doesn't happen that way. Maybe it might happen that way for 1 out of 1 million people, but it doesn't happen that way for the average person. So it's consistency. So my final point would be on personal safety. If you work on accountability and governance issues, also have a sense of what your personal safety is, what you are able to take risk on, and the kind of risk you cannot take. So I always say to young people, if you don't have anybody that can bail you from police station, or you know your parents cannot afford it, you cannot mobilize that kind of money, there is no use being at the forefront of protest, be in the middle. So when you hear the first you run back to your house and disappear. The people who have liver, maybe when they arrest, they are in protest. There are some people who are very popular. If they arrest them today, now all the journalists will carry free XYZ person the next day. Some people, nobody knows us. If they arrest you, they will be delivering the lives with you. Your parents will go and be looking for money to bail you out of prison. You're just going to suffer unnecessarily. If you have the resilience to go through that by yourself, no problem. It's personal choice. But have the sense of awareness of your own personal safety. Don't take unnecessary risk. But have that sense of awareness of your personal safety wherever you go. You want to join protest. You also want to speak truth to power even when you do that. I once wanted to write an article about an injustice in my state that was being perpetrated by my state governor. But then I mentioned it to my mom, and my mom said I shouldn't write it, that if I write it, it will affect her. I said, no, it can affect her. She says, if they write it and the governor actually gets to see it, they can ask whose son is that one, and they say, hey, it's so person's son. Go and stop her salary or stop her pension. I said, no problem, if they stop your pension, your children would be giving money every month. She said, no, I've worked for government for over 20 years. My pension is my right, no matter how much I want to collect, and I don't want anybody to stop it. So I had to take a decision. Do I want my activism to affect my mother's income? I don't want it. I didn't write that article. So that's the kind of thing you need to assess each action. That's a potential risk. The governor might not have seen it. They might not have taken any decision around it. But because I know that potential risk exists, I didn't want that to happen. So have a sense of the risk in anything that you're doing. If the risk is high, you don't have to take it. Don't die for Nigeria. If you die, you might not even be remembered. Nigeria is very poor at remembering our heroes. If you ask teenagers today who is MK Abiola, they have no idea who he is. Or if you ask them about some of the people who have laid down their lives for this country, they might not know. So live for Nigeria and continue to work to push for change in your community. Thank you.